Every senior dev uses this trick, but if you're a junior dev, don't use it because it will probably ruin your career. The temptation to use this trick is so great because the results are really good and they're really hard to ignore. And it's hard to see, why shouldn't I use this if I'm getting such really good results? Well, the problem is if you do use this trick, you might not reach your full potential as a developer, and that probably will actually hurt you long term in your career. Today, we're talking about coding shortcuts, how they hurt your career as a junior developer, and how we can help you avoid that, even if you've already gone down this path to some degree. Hey, junior devs, Dev Mentor Dave here, helping you bridge the gap from learning code to launching a successful career. If you've already started down this path of adding shortcuts to your process or shortcuts to your code itself, and maybe you've started to see some of the pitfalls, leave me a comment below and tell me some of the dangers that you've found in adding shortcuts as a junior developer. Now, before we get into this, let me just preface it by saying I'm 100% guilty of this too. This is not just a problem for junior developers. It can be a problem for mid-level and senior level developers, and even lead developers. It can be a problem for all developers. And the reason why is because we all want that quick win. We all want to be successful as quickly as we possibly can. And really, that's what shortcuts give us. They give us this quick success. However, if we're not careful, those quick wins or that quick success could actually give us some very long-term consequences. And that's what I want to talk about today as we look at this area of code shortcuts. Hey, before we jump in, if you find this kind of content helpful or just interesting, if you would hit the like button, I would really appreciate it. It helps YouTube know that people are interested in this, and it'll help push it out to others who might find it interesting as well. It seems like almost every good book or story or even video game sometimes, somewhere along the way, there's an option for the main character to take a shortcut. And inevitably, when they take that shortcut, generally they don't end up where they intend to end up. They often end up in a dark wood somewhere, or in some sort of pit or some sort of trouble that they didn't foresee coming. And unfortunately, that's really what can happen even as developers when it comes to shortcuts in coding or even shortcuts in learning code. But if we're going to avoid these shortcuts, we're going to need to understand what I'm actually talking about when I say shortcut. Some very common shortcuts that you're going to run into would be things like Stack Overflow code snippets, right? So this is going to Stack Overflow, asking a question and seeing a block of code that somebody has put on there that seems to do exactly what you're looking for. So you just copy it and paste it into your project, and there you go, shortcut. Another very common and very heavily used shortcut, especially for senior developers, is the usage of frameworks. In fact, this is a shortcut that is pretty much taught in almost every boot camp. Almost every coding course is going to show you how to use this shortcut of a framework. And if you're not familiar with what a framework is, I'm actually going to cover that topic tomorrow on Wednesday in the Developer Odyssey series. So feel free to check out that video to learn a little bit more about frameworks, how they work, what they are, and how they are good shortcuts. Another popular shortcut would be hosted services such as Firebase or something like that make it very easy for you to spin up a database and get connected to it with your front end, but you're not really doing anything with backend code. You just kind of got this magical shortcut to a backend. And then, of course, the big shortcut these days that everybody's using, and most of us probably shouldn't be, is AI. AI is everywhere. It's not just on a specific website that you go to and ask questions anymore. It's integrated into all the different tools that we use, and even integrated into your IDE. It's literally everywhere because people want the help. They want the shortcut. And so it's being added to pretty much everything. So that's what I'm talking about when I say coding shortcuts. Now, as you've probably heard me rattle off that list, these are things that really a lot of developers use every single day, especially good senior developers use many of these different tools every single day. And yet it could be something that really hurts you as a junior developer if you jump into those things too early. And there are kind of three ways that I see this actually hurting junior developers. And it's not just a theoretical thing. I've actually noticed junior developers falling into these pitfalls by trying to get introduced into these shortcuts way too early in their career. Many years ago, before I was a developer, I was a courier. And if you don't know what that is, basically, I drove around all day delivering stuff from one place to another. It was kind of like a glorified messenger. But I actually had a job where, as a courier, I had a set route. Now I would go from the same places every single day. So I would just kind of make the same circuit every day. And I had multiple different routes that I did. But when you learn that route, you go with somebody else and they drive the route the first time, and then typically you drive the route the second time, so that you kind of take notes and you see where to go, and you understand how somebody else does it. Well, unfortunately, a lot of times you'll drive with somebody or you'll ride with somebody who's driven that route many times, and they've figured out the fastest way to get from point A to point B. So what you do is you're sitting there, you're taking notes, and you're making sure that you understand where you're going. This was back before we had GPS on our phones. This was back before we had computers in our phones. It was mostly just a phone. If you had a cell phone, actually had a pager at the time, but you would take notes and you would write down the directions and make sure that you knew where you were going. Well, unfortunately, sometimes that path would end up being blocked. There'd be an accident or the road would be closed or something like that. And if all you had written down was that shortcut or that perfect path, you could be lost if you didn't understand the city and how it all worked and where the streets typically went and how to work around the situation that you were in, because we didn't have Siri to sit there and tell us, hey, you need to be redirected, go this way. See, if you didn't take the time to learn all the information about that route and that location that you could, then if your shortcut didn't work, you were out of luck. The same thing is actually true when it comes to learning code. If you spend all your time learning the shortcuts, then you'll actually be limiting your knowledge. See, instead of learning everything that you can about a subject, you're just learning a little bit of it. You're learning the what, you're learning the how instead of the why. You don't know necessarily why this shortcut works. You just know that it works. You just know that it does the thing that you want it to do. So at the end of the day, all of your knowledge about that particular subject is going to be very surface level. It's not really going to help you if you run into a problem where that shortcut doesn't give you the right solution. It may give you a quick win and it may solve a particular problem that you're looking to solve right away. But at the end of the day, it's just going to be a little bit of knowledge, and it's going to be false success. It's going to make you feel like you were successful, but in the end, you might have just hurt yourself by not digging in and learning more and understanding the why behind the problem so that you could understand the why behind the solution. So using shortcuts too early will limit your knowledge as a junior developer. One of the hardest things about teaching anything to anybody, but especially teaching to kids, is the desire to want to help them get the right answer. You want to teach them the information that they need to learn, but you desperately want them to know that information. You want them to understand what it is you're teaching them. You want to feel like, as the teacher, like you're successful, like you have helped them to be who they are supposed to be, help them to learn what they're supposed to learn. And especially with your own kids, and they're going through school, it's really easy and really tempting to kind of give them the shortcuts and give them the answers, so to speak, without them putting in the work, without them understanding the whole process and how they got to that point. It's easy for us to just want to give them the answers, and we, in effect, really kind of hurt them from actually being able to learn on their own. And the same is true with coding shortcuts. See, if we pursue coding shortcuts too early, it can actually limit our problem-solving skills. See, shortcuts typically solve a very specific problem. They're designed to do one thing. They're designed to fix this specific issue. And if you haven't learned how to solve that problem on your own, if you just see that problem and you know you have a solution for it, but you don't know why that solution works, you haven't worked through the problem yourself, then when you run into another problem that shortcut doesn't work for, you're going to be in trouble because you haven't spent the time building your problem-solving skills. Plus, if you just have a quick solution to everything, then that means you don't necessarily understand the actual underlying problem. You haven't actually learned how to troubleshoot what is really going on. You haven't taken the time to dig through all of those errors that are showing up on your screen and trying to figure out, why are these errors here? What do those errors mean? What is this telling me, so that I can figure out the right solution, not just a quick solution. See, as developers, the number one tool that we have is not the coding language itself. The number one tool we have is our ability to think. It's our ability to reason. It's our ability to solve problems, to understand, to deduce what the issue is, so that we can figure out what the right solution is for that specific problem. And if we run down the road of shortcuts like frameworks and code snippets and things like that, or AI questions, if we just run straight into that, then we'll never actually grow in that skill set. And when we hit those times where we find a problem and Google doesn't have an answer for it, or the AI tool doesn't have an answer for it, we're going to be out of luck. We're not going to know how to backtrace that and how to figure out what the actual issue is and find the solution to that problem. So pursuing shortcuts too early in your career will limit your problem-solving skills. There are two things that you will find in every dev shop, and that is coffee and energy drinks. I used to be what I would call a social coffee drinker. I would drink coffee if other people were drinking coffee, but it wasn't something that I really necessarily wanted. It wasn't not something that I needed. It wasn't something that I felt like if I didn't have, I was going to have a bad day. It wasn't anything like that. It was very much, hey, if you guys are going out for coffee, I'll have some coffee, and that's great. But today I pretty much drink coffee every day, and I drink way too much coffee, probably most days. Now I can still say I don't need it, and I can still actually go days without having it, but there is something about having that cup of coffee that just makes everything right with the world in that moment, or in that morning. Unfortunately, there are a lot of other people, especially developers, who really are dependent on that coffee or on that energy drink to give them that jolt, to give them that awareness, to be able to jump into the day and jump into the code. And if we're not careful, coding shortcuts can kind of be like that coffee or like that energy drink, where if we don't have it, we're kind of lost without it. And we really become dependent upon that coding shortcut. So the third way that coding shortcuts hurts your career or limits your career is that it limits your independence. If you're not careful, you can get to a point where you have to have Stack Overflow, or you have to work out of this specific coding language or this specific framework, because you have become so attached to the shortcuts, to the tools, to the specific things that seem like you have been successful, that you are no longer an independent developer. You're no longer somebody who can just learn something new and move forward and add to their repertoire of things that they are able to do. You become very narrow in your focus and very narrow in your abilities and your skills, because you've limited yourself by taking the shortcuts. This is extremely crucial, especially for junior developers. You've got to become as independent as you possibly can. Now, a lot of times when I talk about independence, I talk about being independent from a mentor, independent from senior developers, getting to where you reach a point where you can handle the learning and the troubleshooting and the processing of everything and the practice. You can handle all that on your own. And that's how I typically talk about it. But you need to be independent of frameworks and tools and things like that as well, because the more dependent you are, the more limiting that is for your career, the more limiting it is for future potential employment. See, employers want somebody who can learn new things, who can bring new skills into their repertoire, into their abilities. And if you're somebody who has to depend on those shortcuts, has to depend on specific tools, you're going to be in trouble. And this is really why shortcuts are a great tool for senior developers, but why they don't work very well for junior developers. Because a senior developer has already put in the time and the effort typically to learn the whys. They've put in the time and effort of years usually of troubleshooting and trying to figure out the problem and figure out the solution. They've just put in years of adding to their knowledge and becoming independent. And so because of that, they can use these tools without abusing the tools. Unfortunately, though, there's a lot of junior developers that are just wanting to go fast. They're just wanting to learn quickly. And so they're grasping at all these different things. And to be honest with you, this is a little bit our fault as senior developers. We've been encouraging you to do it. See, we like to share all the cool tricks and things that we've figured out over the years that makes it easier for us to do our job. And unfortunately, that's probably hurt you from really taking the time and learning the things that you need to learn in order to be a senior level developer, in order to be able to use those tools to the best of your ability. If we know that code shortcuts are good things and that they make the senior developer jobs easier, how do we fix this problem for junior developers without just forcing you to become senior developers? Well, I think there's 3 changes that as a junior developer you need to make in order to pull yourself back from the brink. Now, it's not that you can never learn these shortcuts or that learning these shortcuts has made you bad already. No, that's not the case. You just need to make a few changes so that these become beneficial for you in the long term, not just in the short term. You know, growing up, a lot of times you hear your parents say things and they give you instruction, they tell you something and you listen to them and you think, you don't understand what I'm going through. You don't understand this situation. And then you get older and you realize, I think they understood what was going on. I think they knew what they were talking about because now you've gone through life like they have and you've experienced the situations that they had already experienced. And the way that you think about the same situations now has changed because you have more maturity. You have more life experience that has changed, that has shifted the way that you think. And that's the first thing that needs to change, the way that you think about learning. See, most junior developers think about learning as if it's something that needs to be done as quickly as possible. It's all about speed. Well, the problem is speed is only going to get you so far, and it's only going to teach you so much. You need to change your thinking from speed to depth. You need to not worry about how long it takes you to learn something. You need to worry about how well you understand it. You need to focus on understanding the why behind the things that you're learning, not just understanding the what or the how. You need to understand why these things are done the way that they're done. Why do you work through a loop in the way that you're working through that loop? Not just how do I write a loop, right? You need to understand the purpose of it. You need to understand why this is being used, because then you'll be able to take that and apply that to different situations as needed. Once you've learned the why for things, then having a shortcut makes it easier, makes it better, because you know why that shortcut works for that specific scenario. You know why that shortcut is helpful to you in making things faster in that specific area. So as you're learning, as you're growing, as you're getting into this development world, you need to change the way that you think. You need to not think in terms of speed, think in terms of depth. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to visit my brother and his family, and he actually owns a laser tag facility. And I noticed that my laser tag gun did not seem to be hitting anything that, or anyone that I was trying to hit. And so we had to call everything off and pause, and we took everybody's laser tag guns and we kind of set up a little target, and he went through and recalibrated all the guns. Well, actually, he didn't really recalibrate it. He just figured out what the right distance was and told us how to use it better. But what he should have done, and what he did eventually after we were done playing, was actually recalibrate the sights so that they were accurate, so that we had a good way of understanding what we were actually aiming at, that our aim would be true. And goals are kind of like aiming your laser tag gun. You need to create goals that you can actually achieve. You need to create goals that will actually be beneficial to what you're wanting to achieve. And as a junior developer, you probably need to change the way that you are creating your goals. So you need to understand that your goals are probably going to take longer than you want them to take. That's just the reality of learning anything well, learning anything as deep as you can learn it. It's going to be a long process. And I know you've probably had people tell you, you should be able to be a developer in 16 weeks or in 26 weeks or in 52 weeks. You know, they give you all of these numbers that you should be hitting, right? You should be able to be job ready in a certain number of days or a certain number of weeks. That's stupid. Okay. Let me just tell you right now, that's just marketing. You need to set goals that are realistic, that understand it is going to take time for you to actually learn things well, for you to actually learn things in a way that's going to help you have a long career, not just quick, short success. You need to understand that your goals are going to be harder than you want them to be, or harder than other people make it sound like you're going to be. You need to understand that your goals are going to be harder to reach than you think they will be. They're going to be harder to reach than somebody has told you they will be. No doubt someone's probably given you the idea that, hey, you'll be not only job ready, but you'll probably get a job within X number of months of graduating from boot camp or this coding course or whatever it is that you're using. But the reality is all of it is going to be harder than you want it to be and harder than anyone's going to tell you that it's going to be. And so you need to set goals with that in mind. You need to set goals knowing this is going to be tough. It's going to be hard. But you need to set those goals, not just knowing it's going to take longer and it's going to be harder, but you need to set goals knowing that it's worth it in the end. See, a lot of times people hear the fact that something's going to take longer or that it's going to be harder, and they're like, nope, I'm done. I can't do this. That's not what I signed up for. You need to have perseverance. You need to understand that if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to decide, hey, I'm going to understand that my goals are going to take longer than I want them to take. It's going to be harder than I want it to be, but it will be worth it. When you finally get that job, when you finally get into this as a career and you start earning the kind of income that you can earn in this job, you start really being able to put these skills to work in a way that builds really cool things, it will be worth it. So you need to change the way you think about learning. You need to change the way you think about your goals. And finally, you need to change the way that you practice. Everyone is always telling you as a junior developer that you've got to spend time practicing. It just takes time doing it over and over and over and over again. And that is very true, but it also is important what you are practicing. If all you're practicing are the shortcuts, you're not practicing the right thing that's going to help you get to that next level of success. So how do you do that? Well, what I would do if I've been kind of in this world of shortcuts and code, like let's say I've got a framework, I would take a look at some of the functionality of that framework. Maybe it's user authentication, right? Something like that. And I would say, okay, I'm going to try to figure out how to write user authentication all by myself. Maybe it's something even simpler than that, like putting data from a form into a database. Maybe you've never actually done that before. You've never written any backend code that actually interacts with the database. Pick some functionality that you've been using shortcuts for and learn how to do it manually. Learn how to do it yourself. Learn how to code that functionality by yourself. That's going to cause issues that you're going to have to troubleshoot. It's going to force you to figure out problems and solve them. It's just going to make you a better all-around dev. But if you just stick with the shortcuts, you're never really going to be a great dev. Hopefully this has been a help to you today. And if you're new to this channel, one of the best ways to get to know me, get to know how we do things, is to join one of our live stream events. Our next live stream is going to be Monday, February 19th at 7 p.m. If you want to get just a taste of what it's like to be a part of that live stream, check out this video here, which is the latest live stream question and answer time. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you on the next one.